welcome to everyone to this online conversation on the topic ethics and business conduct. I'll start with the first question to you, Andrea. How would you assess the current regulatory landscape within the financial sector? To what extent is ethics imbued within regulations?
Yeah, thank you very much. I would first start by saying that my perspective is really focused on US markets. And so that's one market from a global perspective. But within the US market, financial regulation continues to evolve in and around the economy, in and around financial innovations. And so financial regulation continues to be incredibly important to how the financial systems and the economy actually work within the USA. And I think that's true for other countries as well, that the financial regulation and whether or not ethical principles are imbued in that financial regulation really shape how the economy grows and what access to capital, what access to wealth accumulation, what access to environmental regulation different countries and economies are able to strive towards. Your second question on whether or not it's possible for ethical principles to be imbued in financial regulation, absolutely. There are many people every day who are striving to imbue ethical principles into financial regulations. Those people might be elected officials who are creating legislation. They might be financial professionals working within financial institutions or loan funds, any number of organizations who see their own organization's policies and how can these regulations within business policies be imbued with ethical principles. There are often even citizen advocates who say we want more out of our financial regulations. How can we have shareholder advocacy? How can we talk to our elected officials about wanting to have ethical principles in financial regulations? Yes, it's very possible. And we see that in the US through, for instance, the fair lending laws, which were enacted as part of the civil rights legislations, which created a paradigm in which every person, no matter the color of their skin, has the right to access affordable capital. The challenges in having ethical principles within financial regulations are having sufficient teeth in these regulations so that there's negative consequences that are severe enough to forestall any bad actors. Sometimes regulations can backslide. The regulations that were here one day are reversed the next. We see that a lot in US elections with regulations coming in and out depending on who the elected official is. Also, financial regulations move very slowly. Tend to move very slowly in comparison to economic innovations. And so if you have economic innovations that are moving at speed, you have to have financial regulations that can catch up with them. And that's very hard to do. But financial regulations are incredibly important. And something that I remind everyone is that you are an actor in financial regulations, no matter your seat, to push for and to promote ethical principles that can go into financial regulations.
Thank you, Andrea, for this for your insights. Any compliment or reactions from you, Mehtab or Vic?
Yes, I would like to jump first. Thank you, Virgil. Thank you for your insight, Andrea, on the matter. And I agree with you. In fact, in Mauritius here, our system is quite ethical. I'm talking about the banking system, not the financial system. And I remember some years back, 15 years back, when Basel was first introduced on the banking market. And all the banks, there were not many banks at the time, but we all welcomed the Basel regulation, and all the banks abided and implemented and went on a journey to educate the employees, to embark everyone on how to, because as you say, each one of us, we are an actor. We play an important role in maintaining ethics. So yes, I agree with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mehtab.
You're welcome.
From your perspective, Vic, maybe from a more EU-centric perspective, would you agree or do you have divergent views?
No, I also agree. Thank you very much for your views. And above all, so There is laws and regulations. I think it's very important that adequate laws and regulations are put in place. But I think it is also about how these are implemented. So you can have policies and procedures abiding by the law, etc. But to some extent, it is also about the implementation and how, in fact, business implement these regulations. And I think this also merits attention.
Thank you. There is often the view that the US is less regulating than the EU, or I would formulate it in a different way, that the EU is too much regulating in comparison to the US, and that the EU could actually kill innovation. What would you think? Do you think this is the case, or is there a dilemma here?
I personally don't think so, because these regulations have been thought through. So they are in principle good. So it's not an easy topic. Maybe my fellow panelists have an opinion on this.
With all things, and finding that balance is the struggle, but also where we find communication and discussion and what works and what doesn't work. But that ongoing balance is very hard to maintain, but so worthwhile.
Thank you. So maybe another question to you, Vic. What could you tell from your experience at Commission de surveillance du secteur financier in Luxembourg? Do businesses have unethical behaviors while actually respecting regulations? What do you see from your experience?
I mean, when I see something from my experience, it first of all, it concerns a very small minority of businesses. And I think that generally speaking, laws and regulations are good. Maybe, in my opinion, sometimes a little bit too generalistic. And this is why I said before, it is also about the actual implementation and the specific cases, because I think for the legislator, it's very difficult to foresee every bit of specific situation. So I think, as usual, the devil is in the details. But this is my point of view on this topic.
Thank you. Any reaction, maybe Mehtab?
Yes, I would like to add that abiding to regulation, as I'm talking from a bank perspective, we do have many regulations and we do abide to the regulations, but that does not mean that the business is doing things ethically, because there are many ways to do a report. The end result is the regulators going to get the required report, but that doesn't mean that the way the report has been done, it was done in an ethical manner. So it is in the behavior of the organization, of the person doing the report, to ethically report the things needed to be reported as required by the central bank or any regulatory bodies. So there could be a gap between what is being reported and how it is being reported. Yes.
Thank you. So maybe we can develop a bit this aspect with the next questions to you, Mehtab. How can we support ethical behavior in business organizations while maintaining a balance between profit and ethics? I know you wrote your essay about ethical leadership. Maybe it can help to answer or develop the answer.
Yes, thank you. I have this topic really at heart, ethics specifically. And one thing is for sure, it is impossible for an organization to be 100% ethical. We have to be, because it depends on each individual within the organization. We can target it, but it's a long journey. And at the same time, to maximize return on the assets, because we must not forget we've got all stakeholders within having an interest in an organization, the investors, the shareholders, the employees, the regulatory, etc. Now, to be able to maintain a balance between ethics and profits, it will depend on, according to me, two main factors. What is the organizational culture prevailing in the organization and the shared ways of working, and what is the leadership style adopted by the management, really? Personally, I think that the organization must adopt a culture that will emphasize on doing the right things, even when it comes to costly. In my paper, I talk about the Wells Fargo Bank and the scandal that occurred around Wells Fargo. And starting with the leadership. It should always start with the leadership, because as employees of the financial institutions, we have our focus. We agree or we don't agree, we have our focus on the management, on the leadership, and how they do things. And if they do things rightly, this gives us the right perspective on how we should do things. So the tone needs to be set at higher level. This is what I meant when I talk about ethical leadership within an organization. And when it comes to the culture, once again, it's up to the senior management to send a positive message and provide a model of what a good behavior is. And this should communicate clear of ethical expectation, because we have the tendency to put ethics at the background, and some employees doesn't know whether there is a code of ethics within an organization. There's no training sometimes how to reinforce ethical code of conduct. So there's such easy points, easy things that we can do to promote ethics within an organization. For example, the appraisal of the employees. I'm talking in my local context. I don't know how it is in the US or in Europe, but in our local context, we don't really have an evaluation on decision made according to ethics, for instance. You just have your targets, and if you reach your targets, you're well remunerated, and if you don't, then you don't get paid like you should. But yeah, and lastly, I think there should be a protective mechanism to protect all employees who report unethical conduct. To my opinion, I also, there's a lapse. We don't really protect the employees who voice out or who do the whistleblowers. So we should protect their identity. We should protect them, and this is very important to encourage other employees to do the same. Yeah. So to summarize all my points, ethical leadership and the organization culture. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the insights.
You're welcome.
From your views, Andrea, would you have anything to add, or what is your reflections?
Agree with everything that was just said. And I was also reminded that people really drive ethics, that it's hard for businesses to drive ethics. We can have codes of ethics, but who upholds them, who enforces them? And so for people, wherever your seat is, that without people driving ethics will fall. And so and it's hard to maintain ethics, especially when, again, you have to balance ethics and profit. And so having leaders who can, to your point, show management how to percolate that ethics up and down is incredibly important, but hard.
Thank you very much. Maybe one last question to all three of you. Do you have any forward-looking predictions about ethics in finance? Now we have a new US president, and things may change in one direction or another. So what would you think that in which direction would ethics in finance or financial regulation go?
I have a bit of a pessimistic view on that right now. And from a U.S. perspective, and sitting in really advocating for ethical principles in financial regulation, especially with access to capital, seeing a lot of concerning signs. At the time of recording, the new presidential administration for President Trump was inaugurated yesterday, and we're already seeing the rollback of very important regulations that go into ethical behavior concerning diversity, equity, and inclusion across the across industries and the government policy on that. We're seeing new leadership coming into place that may or may not be elected with significant influence over policies and regulations and financial regulations. And we're already seeing that the US has withdrawn from the Paris Agreement immediately. And so we're seeing all of this. So these are concerning signs to me. We haven't seen anything about financial regulation explicitly yet, but that tends to be a bit of a hot topic button in the US and a more sensitive one. So those are usually done more behind the scenes, a bit more quietly. But in preparing for this conversation and watching the inauguration yesterday and the executive orders come through, was really reminded again, I know I'm a broken record, the power that one person can have in driving forward ethics or removing ethics. And it doesn't have to be one person who has a lot of power sitting in the White House, although that is tremendous, but it can be someone building their own policies in a company that can fight against that.
Thank you very much for your insights. I think it was a great conversation, and we had a very interesting discussion on this topic. So thank you very much for your time.